I've seen that the information has been spreading more and people are kind of waking up. There's a lot of liberal friends, non-Iranian, that I have or followers that are kind of now also waking up to, oh, maybe that narrative we were seeing is wrong. Oh, maybe they're not anti-imperialist. Oh, I didn't realize it was that bad. So I am seeing a lot of that. I get messages like that. Influential people who are now watching these videos and sharing them. And that, to me, is a great sign of the narrative changing.
Welcome to Making Peace Visible, the podcast about peace, conflict, and the media. I'm your host, Jamil Simon. A warning, this episode contains descriptions of violence. More than half of Americans say they use social media and online video as a news source, according to a survey from Reuters Institute and Oxford University. A growing number of people around the world say social media is their main source for news. You've probably heard a lot about the drawbacks of social media. We've discussed some of the issues in previous episodes. For instance, information on social media often comes with less accuracy and more bias compared to traditional journalism. And yet sometimes social media creators can be nimbler and more effective than journalists, like in times of crisis or in places where reporters are targeted for arrest or even worse. The situation in Iran in 2026 is both. Massive protests against the devaluation of Iran's currency and the oppressive regime erupted around the country on December 28th. The government crackdown that followed was the deadliest in decades, according to Amnesty International. Massacres on January 8th and 9th put the death toll over 6,000. According to the Center for Human Rights in Iran, tens of thousands are still being held in detention centers. Without journalists who are safe and able to report the facts, the world has been relying on cell phone video, text, and social media to learn what's going on in Iran. Our guest this episode is Nazanin Nour. She's a social media content creator who's been using her platforms to translate videos, share messages from people on the ground, and build support for the protesters in Iran. In normal times, Nazanin's YouTube and Instagram accounts feature conversations on Iranian diaspora culture. Think music, quizzes, jokes, sometimes politics. But these days, she's laser-focused on the bloody crisis in Iran. She's calling attention to the mass killings and disappearances and calling out content creators who promote the Islamic Republic's narrative. Our show's producer, Andrew Maraskin, spoke with Nazanin Nour on February 10th.
Nazanin Nour is an Iranian-American actor and activist based in Los Angeles. She's host and producer of the web series Mehmouni with Nazanin, which you can find on YouTube and Spotify. Nazanin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So the reason we're having this conversation right now, February 10th, 2026, is, of course, to talk about the protest movement in Iran, which you've been supporting very vocally. But I want to start in kind of a softer place and give our listeners a chance to get to know you. You were born and raised in Northern Virginia. Your parents are from Iran. What was your relationship like with Iran and Iranian culture as you were growing up?
Very close. My parents were not the type of immigrant parents that wanted me to be assimilated in a specific way to American culture. They were very much wanted me to hold on to my Iranian culture, and they spoke Persian to me in the house. They put me in Persian school. I would go there every Saturday too as a child for many years. And they also took me to Iran when I was a young child for my first time. So, and my parents' story is a little bit different than a lot of other people's. Mine got married in Iran in 1975 and then came to the States to get their degrees in engineering. And then the plan was to go back to Iran. But then the revolution happened. The Iran-Iraq war started. I was born during the war. And my family in Iran, everybody was like, you guys should just stay there at this point. This is not a place that you can come back to right now, and definitely not to raise a girl. So I feel like for my parents, it was even more important that I stayed true to my culture and know where I come from, because I couldn't go back and actually live in my homeland.
Now you have a YouTube channel with over 14,000 subscribers, Instagram with over 330,000 followers. And the way that I found out about you is I was just searching Iran protests on Instagram. And you're not the only content creator in the Iranian diaspora who's using their platform to raise awareness and support for the protesters, of course. But you really stand out because your talk show, Mehmouni, and much of your career is about Iranians and Iranian culture. I mean, Nazanin, there's even a video of you walking down Hollywood Boulevard holding a map, asking people on the street, can you find Iran on the map? So can you talk about why you decided to put Iranian heritage front and center in your work?
I think I've had this innate sense of being really proud of where I come from, which was always bolstered by my parents. And again, just being surrounded by Iranian culture, growing up with other Iranian families that had immigrated. So all the kids grew up together. So it's like we were just always together, celebrating Nowruz and just doing all the things. And, ever since I was born in this country, Iran is never in the headlines for a good reason, because people conflate Iran and its thousands of years of history and beautiful culture and art and music and everything it's contributed to society with the Islamic Republic that's, only been in power since 1979. And so there's always this narrative that's out there that I feel like people don't know what Iran is like, what Iran's history is, what its people are like. And I think, being bullied and teased in school for being Iranian always kind of made me actually double down on being proud of where I come from. It was like, well, I'm going to show you how cool it is. And it was really important to me to share that with the world in my own way. I grew up watching Saturday Night Live, Weekend Update, Daily Show. So I love blending politics and humor. And so I always think the best way to get through to people or to inform them on stuff is to disarm them with humor sometimes and curiosity. And I have some deep conversations. I brought on my good friend Gisuniya. She's a human rights lawyer. So we had a very, frank discussion about Iran, Israel, Palestine, war crimes, etc. I brought on the sister of a victim of the Islamic Republic during the Women Life Freedom protests. I brought on a rapper, an actor, so it's just kind of runs the gamut. But I would say start with the clips, because the clips will give you a good taste of what the show's about.
I want to say, in case people haven't seen you online and they're listening to this, you don't look at all like the Islamic Republic's idea of what an Iranian woman is supposed to look like. You're stylish, you have makeup, you wear fitted clothing. Do you ever blow people's minds when you're doing your Women on the Street segments and they're like, you're Iranian?
Not anymore. I think that most people have enough of a sense of Iran to know that there's different types of people in and out of the country. And also that I think more people have caught on that the regime is different from the people. I do remember that I did one of these street segments in DC outside of the White House. This was during Trump's first term. And there was a choir from Virginia that had just come up to sing hymns for him or something. And I did my questions with them, and it was a group of white women, and they were flabbergasted. I was like, have you ever met an Iranian? And they were like, no. I said, okay, well, I'm your first Iranian friend. And they were like, but your hair is out and you're wearing a tight dress. And I was like, well, that's not, that's imposed on the women of Iran. That, some people do choose to cover, but women in Iran would like to be able to choose to dress how they please. A lot of Iranians are also secular. A lot of Iranians separate, religion from their daily lives. So yeah, they were very shocked. But I don't get that as much anymore, especially in LA. We have the largest concentrations of Iranians here outside of Iran. So I think people in LA are more familiar with us and our culture because of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as I'm thinking of it now, the Women Life Freedom movement called attention to the fact that a lot of Iranian women don't want to have to cover up their hair and their bodies.
I think one of the beautiful things that came out of Women Life Freedom was we would see these images from the protesters in the streets where there were some women in the traditional headscarf or chador, the long black, looks like a cloak, walking alongside girls that were dressed like me. And they were holding hands and showing unity. And it's like, yeah, you should have the freedom to dress how you want and observe a religion in your way. And I should have the freedom to not want to observe that religion and look like this, Yeah,
absolutely. So let's start talking about the protest movement now. Since the end of December, you've been using your Instagram account exclusively to call attention to the protests in Iran and the government's mass killing of protesters. And social media accounts like yours are so important right now because, first of all, there's no press freedom in Iran. Secondly, it's not safe for journalists. I don't see anyone reporting from the street. And as you pointed out, the foreign journalists you do see reporting, they have the, approval of the regime, which really restricts what they can broadcast. So where are you getting information about what's happening in Iran?
I get my information from the people. There's a lot of accounts that verify and geolocate. Some of them work for BBC Verify and BBC International that have been working really hard around the clock to verify all the videos coming out. And so there's trusted sources that I go to. Thank you so much for pointing out the thing about the foreign press as well, because that's a message we've been trying to, drive home for a really long time to get people to understand there is no such thing as press freedom inside of Iran. So when people are in there and saying we have an exclusive, no, you have an exclusive with regime. You've been given a press pass for a reason, and they're going to give you a narrative to take back to spread to your home countries. And that's how that works. The journalists in Iran, they've been executed. Ruhul Azam was. Nilufar Hamedi and Elohim Mohammadi, who broke the Gina Masa Amini story, which started Women Life Freedom, were imprisoned for 11 months. They shut down a newspaper a few weeks ago for covering the Iran massacre. So there is no such thing as press freedom. So my information is coming from people on the ground. Obviously, I can't give out any identifying markers. All types of people inside of Iran. They provide voice notes, videos, etc. So that's where the bulk of the information is coming from.
What are the stories that you're hearing that the mainstream news in the West is missing?
I think people need to understand that there are thousands upon thousands of people murdered. There are thousands of people who have been forcibly disappeared, and their families still don't know where they are, that they've been missing since January 8th, which was the first really large day of protests. It was when millions poured out into the streets. It's numbers who experts and historians have said we haven't seen in Iran since 2009's Green Movement. It was supported by the former Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi. He asked people to come out on January 8th and 9th specifically, and those two nights really saw a big swell in people in the streets. So massive scale of killing. The massacre committed mostly on those 2 days. So there's still people that they don't have any information on their family. And what the regime does is, they hold the bodies, right? And then if they shoot you with a bullet, they charge the family a bullet fee to be able to retrieve the body. Not only is Iran under the worst economic crisis they've ever had, nobody has that type of money. So some people can't even get their loved ones back. We did the calculation, and it's just a little bit under $4,000 for a bullet fee to get your family back. They threaten families with violence and imprisonment. They discourage people from gathering for funerals because they know that could turn into another protest movement. And so they come break up funerals. They'll, desecrate grave sites. They're doing unspeakable horrors with torture, sexual assault, boys, girls, women, and men. The horrors are countless. And despite what the regime told President Trump that, we've stopped executions, Iran has had 316 executions just in the month of January. And I think that's the thing that people are missing. And the biggest thing that people have got to understand is the overwhelming majority of Iranians want this regime gone. That is why they come out to the streets. There's always this powder keg moment and a spark, right? It was Gina Masa Amini's killing in 2022. This time it was the economic crisis. In 2019, it was a hike in fuel prices. 2009, it was where is my vote after the Green Movement elections. It's always a spark, but they quickly turn into anti-regime protests because that's what's the underlying cause of all of this.
We mentioned the Women Life Freedom protest movement in the fall of 2022. And, reflecting on that, I remember seeing a lot more coverage. There was a lot more in my Instagram feed and in the news. I'm sure everybody listening remembers the videos of women taking off their hijabs, marching, cutting their hair. I'm seeing a lot less. It's like there's information there, but I have to go looking for it. And it's not like I unfollowed the accounts that were covering Women Life Freedom. The protests are even bigger and the death tolls are even higher. So why do you think that, we're not seeing more about the protests and the crackdown?
It's a great question. We've noticed the same thing, specifically in the media as well. And that's a great question to ask the media and the people that run the big networks.
I mean, social media too, in terms of solidarity and support.
Oh, yes. Solidarity and support has definitely waned since 2022. I think there's a lot of different factors at play. I think some people don't know and don't care. That's the honest truth. I think some people don't understand. Some people conflate the Islamic Republic with being this anti-imperialist force. They're the only country that stands up to the US and Israel, for example, right? And so they see them as these faux heroes. And I say faux because they're obviously not. They're a murderous, dictatorial, theocratic regime that has committed, by the way, according to human rights experts and historians, the worst massacre in Iran's modern history. And the amount of people killed in the span of time, like I said, January 8th and 9th, It's being compared to the Rwandan genocide numbers, and it's worse than the Srebrenica massacre. So the kills per minute, so to say, are at a rate that people have never seen when it comes to Iran. So I don't know how people can see them as heroes after all of that, but some people do. And to those people, I also say the Islamic Republic itself is an imperialist force. You know, their proxy groups have destabilized other countries in the region like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, etc. So if you want to be anti-imperialism, you should be anti-Islamic Republic. I think also some people have a problem with the fact that the word Islamic is in the title. And so some people kind of incorrectly conflate this with, oh, it's anti-Islam or anti-religion. It's no, when you rule an entire population of people with religion, and then you say that the reason that we're torturing you and raping you and executing you, et cetera, is in the name of this religion, you're going to create a lot of people who want nothing to do with religion and that religion specifically. So I think that's some context that's missing from a lot of the conversations too. But I think a lot of it does unfortunately go back to this like tanky, far leftist narrative where it's like, oh, they're a sovereign nation and leave them alone.
You know, it's so funny. Like I was telling my dad that I was doing this interview a few days ago, and he's actually an old lefty. And he's like, yeah, there's this disease on the left called tankyism. I'd never heard the word before.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I learned it a few years ago because of this, because I was starting to see, you know, I'm a liberal. I've voted Democrat my whole life. That's not a secret. And I started noticing in the last like 10 years, I was like, okay, so my party is like not that great when it comes to the Islamic Republic. They're not as harsh. They're not as stern. They're not as willing to go that extra mile to actually combat the regime. And I started seeing more and more of this, and it's been so eye-opening and disappointing. And yeah, a far left narrative will get you. So it's been really hard to get support this time around. And I haven't been able to put my finger on exactly why, other than those few reasons.
Yeah. So as you alluded to, and you've also talked about in your account, there are people who were very vocal in support for Palestinians and were very vocal in ending the war in Gaza and are continuing to put pressure on Israel, like Greta Thunberg, for example. And these same people are silent or quiet when it comes to supporting Iran. And, you know, I totally agree with you. This kind of selective support for human rights is totally reprehensible. People should be called out. Like it's really upsetting. But with the Gaza war, at least for Americans, it was clear what you could do about it. You could demand that the U.S. government stop funding and supporting the Israeli military. So for people listening who want to support protesters in Iran, what can they do?
To your first point, yeah, that's been something that's also been eye-opening for me as well, because I've been very vocally pro-Palestinian freedom for decades. It's not something that I jumped on the bandwagon. I've always felt that way. And I've always stood for that community. But to not see specific activists or people also use their platform to speak out on behalf of Iran. And I do think it goes back to that narrative of thinking, oh, well, this regime stands up for Palestinians, where, again, we all know they do not care about Palestinian life. They kill Iranian civilians on a daily basis. What makes you think they care about, the civilians in other countries? It's about control and power in the Middle East and the region. And so that's the first part of that. And then the second part, what can they do? People can listen to Iranian voices, amplify Iranian voices, urge your elected officials to take action against the regime. So, listen to Iranians, believe Iranians, don't talk over Iranians. People are telling you, people have been gunned down in the street. Blood is still spilled on the streets right now in Iran, telling you what they want. I saw this video from this TikToker last week. I was enraged again. And, a white liberal woman in Los Angeles, so enjoying all the freedoms and privilege that she can. And she said something almost verbatim. She said, okay, I know the government's a little conservative. I was like, a little conservative? They are literally raping girls and women before they execute them so they won't go to heaven. They are killing protesters in the streets. And you're telling me that they're a little conservative because it fit her far left narrative of being anti-US and anti-Israel. And it's so infuriating and frustrating to see people with the utmost privilege choosing to use it to suppress people who are already oppressed.
Yeah. And it just shows how polarized we are. Because, you had one post where like, here's what to say about Iran if you're afraid of saying the wrong thing. People, especially in the age of social media, they're afraid of being criticized by their own side.
Right. I think a lot of people were afraid because, unfortunately, I saw when some people, even Miss Rachel, posted for Iranian children yesterday. And there are still some people in there being like, oh, Zionist, $7,000. You're getting paid by, it's like you can't even speak for humanity without people accusing you of something else. And it's just infuriating.
If you could somehow convince Donald Trump to do the right thing, what would you have him do?
Oh, that's a really tough question. The people of Iran have been very clear. They've been asking for help. A lot of people have gotten to the end of the rope about we've tried year after year after year with shorter time spans in between uprisings. We go and we with empty hands, with bare hands. They don't have weapons. They don't have any of these things to go fight for their freedom. And they're always met with bullets and death and executions and sexual assault and imprisonment and torture. And so Donald Trump promised, if they shoot, we're going to shoot back. Then he said, help is on the way. He encouraged people to go out into the streets. And there's people that really believe that. There's people that really took his word for it. So if he's going to do something to help, now would be the time to do it. You know, I'm not a policy expert or analyst, so I can't tell you exactly what that would look like. But I think listening to the people on the ground, that they've heeded his words and they believed him. Not everybody, but a lot of people believed him. A lot of people thought, okay, finally, someone's going to come to our rescue. It's not going to be like an Obama situation in 2009 where he didn't do anything during the Green Movement. And he even himself said on a podcast a couple of years ago, that was one of his biggest regrets, was not doing more to help the people of Iran and standing on the side of humanity with them. So Donald Trump talks about how President Obama was a failure. And, you know, what was the word everybody used? Obama level betrayal. Now we have a Trump level betrayal. You know, you sent all these people out into the streets. The regime is responsible for the massacre, but also giving people this false sense of hope that you were going to help them is just devastating.
Yeah, and it's a little confusing too, because, you know, we've seen the aircraft carriers in the region. Do you think if there was a military intervention or the United States was to help overthrow or unseat the leaders of the regime, do you think that would benefit the Iranian people?
Iranians themselves are very capable of being able to lead themselves out. I said the former crown prince, he has a transition plan, and there's a lot of people that support him. There's people that support him within the country too. They were chanting his name in the streets during the protest to, you know, kind of lead Iran out of the Islamic Republic, transition them out, and have free and fair elections so that people can actually choose their leader. They just need help getting to the part of the transition.
What would you like to see happen after the Islamic Republic?
I would love to see a free and fair election in Iran where the people of Iran get to choose who's on their ballot and get to vote. And the person with the majority of votes gets to go rule. And if that's the former crown prince, Reza Pahlavi, so be it. I just want them to have the choice.
So for people who don't speak Farsi, where do you recommend they go for updates about Iran? You know, whether it's news sources, rights organizations.
If you want rights organizations, so there's the Iran Rights, that's their Instagram handle, Iran Rights. And if it's the Abdurrahman Buruman Center for Human Rights in Iran, they document all the crimes against humanity that's committed by the regime. And then there's the Iran Human Rights Documentation Center, which is IHRDC. There is the Center for Human Rights in Iran. And then there's also, you know, people on Twitter who I said, like they post all the videos that are confirmed and geolocated and pictures and information. So I would follow them too.
So we talked a little bit about the frustrations of being part of the social media discourse around Iran right now. What are some of the high points for you? Or if not at high points, you know, where do you feel you're making a positive difference with your content?
Yeah, definitely no high points to this because I wish to never have to make this type of content. That's the reality.
Of course.
But I think I've seen that the information has been spreading more and people are kind of waking up. There's a lot of liberal friends, non-Iranian that I have or followers that are kind of now also waking up to, oh, maybe that narrative we were seeing is wrong. Oh, yeah, maybe they're not anti-imperialist. Oh, I didn't realize it was that bad. So I am seeing a lot of that. I get messages like that, influential people who are now watching these videos and sharing them. And that to me is a great sign of the narrative changing. You know, it's not about like what celebrity's watching your video, but it's about that network that person can now go share this information with. You know, I think that's a positive outcome. So at least more people know in this day and age, especially in 2026, with everything we've seen come out of Iran in the last just 5 years of uprisings, nobody can say we didn't know. So if they're still defending this regime whitewashing it, taking funded trips, propaganda trips like some content creators and journalists do, then they're doing it with blood of Iranians on their hands, and they should know that.
Can you say a little bit more about journalists taking funded trips or content creators taking funded trips to Iran?
There's a state-funded creator event last summer. I made a video about it last week. There's a few content creators that have been posting pro-regime videos, pro-regime content, pro-regime narratives. And we started looking them up and I was like, oh yeah, okay, so all these people went on this trip. So they get invited. It was a 4-day trip. They get taken to specific sites. It was under the guise of showing them the aftermath of Israel's attack on Iran, right? Where they did take out, through targeted strikes, some IRGC officials, a lot of IRGC officials, but they also killed civilians. And so they were bringing them in to report on the civilian deaths, which are absolutely horrendous and horrible. And I was very outspoken against the civilian deaths as well. But they're not telling you all the other stuff, these creators, right? So they're painting this narrative that the regime wants them to come back and say. And I saw them downplaying, the protests were not that big the last few weeks. This is Israel. This is Zionist. This is Mossad. This is the CIA. Just taking away all of Iranians' agencies. And then I kind of went through the list and showed people how this propaganda gets spread. You bring in creators who they already have their own following and platform. People trust them. Their followers trust them. They make it seem like, look, I'm in Iran. I have my hair out. Well, yeah, because the state's letting you do that so that you go back and post your pictures next to our beautiful architecture and make it seem like that's everyday life for girls there when we all know that's not the case. There's a thing called Gray Zone, and there's a journalist on there named Max Blumenthal. He also took this trip last summer and he talks over all Iranians. I called him out on a couple things with facts, and he, called me a Hollywood Zionist lackey, an Iranian-American woman. And I'm like, you're a white guy living in America. Again, you have the most privilege, yet you're choosing to go lick the boots of a repressive, murderous regime and then come back and speak over actual Iranians and their experience. Like, how dare you? I think people need to be aware of stuff like that so that when they consume media, they know the source. You know how Instagram started this thing where you had to put hashtag ad if you were being paid to hawk a product or something?
Actually, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it says hashtag ad, so people would know if I come up and I'm like, I love this tea. Well, now you know I'm getting paid to say it, but that helps you discern. I think we need to have something where under your Twitter, your X post or your Instagram post, your TikTok, it should say, took a state-funded trip by the IRGC or, visited the Communist Party of China. Like, you should know, so then you can at least, sure, you can make your content, you have freedom of speech, but at least the viewer knows, oh, maybe this is why this person has that point of view,
IRGC is?
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, yeah. They're armed, and they're like the top people that are meant to, they control everything in the country. They have their hand in everything. It's run like a mafia. They control the black market for goods because they get to, circumvent sanctions. They're the ones out in the streets with all the big weapons.
I guess that's how they stay in power.
Absolutely. There's hundreds of thousands of them and they're armed to the teeth.
So when was the last time you visited Iran?
2010.
So I know it would not be safe for you to go now.
No.
But was there something that happened between 2010 and now that made it more dangerous or impossible for you to visit?
Yeah. So I went 2 years in a row, 2009, 2010. So when I was there in 2009, I happened to get there 2 days before the Green Movement elections. So
Wow.
My sister, we both voted. And we all saw what happened, major uprising, people were killed, and that was quashed, and it was a rigged election. And so the reformist candidate lost and the hardliner Ahmadinejad won, right? Or won. After that, I wrote a script based on my experiences there. And that was when Twitter had just started. So I had tweeted some things out. I had put on my social media about how the elections were stolen and us. So I spoke out, but I wasn't afraid then. And then I went back in 2010. I wasn't questioned in 2010, but I'm trying to remember. I know that I deactivated my social media before I went because that's what everybody does. And then once I left, my script had gotten into the first round of the Sundance Screenwriters Lab. And then I booked a television series where I played an Iranian-American journalist who was taken hostage by the regime, which is also what the regime does. They use hostage diplomacy. And they actually took a Washington Post journalist hostage, Jason Rezaian, a very short time after that. So all of that My family was like, I don't think it's safe for you to come back anymore because now you've done this role on television where it's like directly against the regime. So, the joke amongst diaspora is we can go back. We might not be able to get out is the problem because you're definitely going to be interrogated. You could be imprisoned. You could be killed. You could be used for hostage diplomacy. So every scenario is bad.
The stuff we've been talking about. And so often if Americans see images of Iran at all, they're not fun.
Right.
We put it that way. So I wonder if you could share a fun memory that you had on a visit to Iran.
I have so many fun memories from Iran. We have joy there despite what the regime tries to do to keep you oppressed. Weddings, the most fun, joyous weddings full of dancing and all the stuff you have here at your weddings too, except with a, Persian cultural flair. Oh, memories of going to all of the big, beautiful parks there at night. People come out, couples, families, et cetera. And people are eating, having ice cream, playing football. The park is like somewhere very lively to be in the evenings and just strolling through the streets. I'd go up to the mountains and have little picnics with my cousins next to like a babbling brook, and we're like making kebab on stones with fire, to going up north to Iran through the windy roads and stopping for food and drinks along the way. And they have these things set up where you're on these traditional cushions that are right on the water. So the water is streaming under you and you're just like having this beautiful meal. I could go on and on. My parents are from this province in the southwest called Khuzestan, specifically from a city called Ahvaz. And, it's very hot there, very hot. And we would always go during the summers. So, great memories of being inside like my aunt's house and everybody packing into the house and bringing their instruments and everyone sitting around singing, telling jokes. People of Iran are just like people everywhere else. They laugh, they love, they eat, they are hospitable and warm and generous, and they just want to have the freedom to have a normal life.
You can follow Nazanin Nour on Instagram at I am Nazanin Nour and on YouTube at Nazanin Nour. We also have links in the show notes to the human rights organizations that Nazanin mentioned in the interview. Before you go, I want to tell you about something exciting we have coming up on the podcast. The intensifying political divide in America is weakening how we govern, how we educate, how we report the news, and how we relate to our neighbors. And worst of all, it's weakening our democracy in very real ways, and that should worry all of us. In a new 6-part series focused on the United States, we're asking questions that matter to all Americans. What is polarization costing us? What can we do to reduce it? Where have past efforts fallen short? And how can ordinary Americans re-engage in this 250-year-old nation we share? This series will look at critical sectors in American society, media, government, education, technology, and others. And we'll talk with experts about real solutions to this serious existential threat to our country. We're going to take a couple of months off to produce this series, which we're calling American Divide. We'll be back in your feed on May 5th, and the series will run every week for 6 weeks. Stay tuned to our social media feeds and our mailing list for more info about this series. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Making Peace Visible. If you're not on our email list, sign up at makingpeacevisible.org/contact. Making Peace Visible is produced by Andrea Maraskin. The associate producer is Faith McClure, and I'm Jamil Simon. Thanks for listening, and talk soon.